Ladies and gentlemen, let us gather our minds today to explore a subject that affects relationships, families, organizations, even nations. It is the silent war between the authentic self and the manufactured ego. You see, when you don't know who you are, someone else will assign you an identity. And when that identity is manipulated, control is established. This is the very essence of how a narcissist operates. But today I speak not of the manipulator, but of the one who rises above them. I speak of the super empath. The first way a super empath dismantles the control of a narcissist is by being clear in their identity. You cannot manipulate a person who knows who they are. The super empath understands that their value is not defined by attention, approval, or applause. They are not seeking to be liked. They are committed to being aligned. Alignment with truth, with purpose, with the divine order of who they are. When you are clear on your identity, you silence the voice of false affirmation. The second key is what I call emotional sovereignty. The super empath refuses to hand over the keys of their emotional state. The narcissist thrives on reaction. But when the empath chooses to respond instead of react, the narcissist is disarmed. Emotional mastery is not detachment. It is dominion. It is the ability to feel deeply without being controlled by the depth of the feeling. Thirdly, the super empath understands the power of silence. Silence is not absence. It is presence with discipline. It is not avoidance, it is strategy. The narcissist speaks to provoke, but the empath listens to discern. And when necessary, they speak with authority, not emotion. And that, my friends, breaks the cycle of manipulation. The fourth method is the boldness to speak truth without fear. Not in anger, but in clarity. Not to destroy, but to expose. When a super empath speaks truth, it is not to shame, but to shed light. The narcissist loses power when their illusion is confronted by reality. You cannot maintain control where truth lives. The fifth key is the power to walk away without explaining your worth. The super empath does not negotiate their value. They do not need to convince the narcissist to change. Instead, they remove the supply and return to their assignment. Their departure is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is purpose in motion. You do. With what you're calling, you ascend from it. The first keynote addresses the critical importance of clarity of identity in the life of a super empath. The narcissist, in their quest for control, seeks to create confusion and disorientation in their victims. They thrive on instability and insecurity, manipulating others to the point where their sense of self becomes dependent on the narcissist's approval. This is how they maintain their power, by twisting the identity of others, forcing them to rely on the narcissist's perception of who they should be. But the super empath, someone grounded in a deep, intrinsic understanding of their own identity, poses a direct threat to this power. When you understand who you are at the core of your being, you become unshakable in the face of external pressures. A super empath does not seek to define themselves through the eyes of others or rely on validation from those around them. Their identity is anchored not in fleeting opinions, but in their own sense of purpose and connection to a higher calling. This clarity of identity becomes their shield against the manipulative tactics of the narcissist. Identity is a fluid concept, one that can be altered or warped at will to suit their needs. For them, control is achieved by confusing their victims, making them question their own worth, and replacing their self-image with one that aligns with the narcissist's desires. Narcissists operate by creating environments of emotional chaos, where the target's sense of self is destabilized and they begin to depend on the narcissist for direction, affirmation, and validation. This manipulation erodes their autonomy and turns them into passive participants in their own lives, constantly seeking approval from the narcissist to feel validated. But the super empath stands apart because their identity is not so easily shaken. They operate from a place of inner certainty. They know who they are and what they stand for. This inner conviction renders them impervious to the narcissist's tactics of manipulation. Where the narcissist seeks to control, the super empath seeks to align. The super empath understands their value and is not swayed by external opinions or manipulation. They have cultivated a deep self-awareness that allows them to be guided by their core values rather than external validation. They don't need to be told who they are because they've already defined their purpose. Having a clear sense of identity doesn't mean that the super empath is inflexible or rigid. On the contrary, clarity of identity in the empathic sense means alignment with purpose. The super empath understands that they are part of a greater plan and that their purpose is not to serve the narcissist's agenda. Their identity is rooted in something higher, a moral compass, a deep-seated belief in truth, and a profound connection to their own worth. This sense of purpose provides them with the strength to stand firm in the face of narcissistic manipulation. It is essential to understand that clarity of identity for a super empath is not about ego. It is not about elevating themselves over others, but about knowing their place in the world and refusing to be moved by forces that seek to distort that place. This clarity provides a foundation for every action they take, every decision they make. It creates an unshakable resilience that ensures they cannot be easily manipulated or controlled. The narcissist seeks to blur boundaries, to distort the very essence of who someone is, turning them into an extension of themselves. The super empath, on the other hand, stands strong in their own identity, maintaining clear and healthy boundaries that protect their emotional and psychological well-being. This does not mean that the super empath is cold or detached. On the contrary, it means they can offer love, empathy, and support from a place of strength and self-awareness rather than from a position of neediness or dependence. They do not lose themselves in relationships or situations, but rather they stand firm in their truth. This distinction allows them to navigate complex dynamics with the narcissist responding from a place of power, not vulnerability. They are no longer susceptible to the narcissist's attempts to gaslight, manipulate, or belittle them because they possess an unwavering understanding of their own worth. The super empath's clarity of identity is also crucial because it enables them to choose their battles wisely. They do not engage in power struggles with the narcissist, for they recognize that such struggles are based on false premises. The narcissist's need for control is rooted in fear and insecurity, while the super empath's strength comes from their ability to remain grounded in their own identity. This sense of certainty allows them to disengage from toxic dynamics without losing their sense of self. In the face of narcissistic control, the super empath remains focused on their own journey and mission, refusing to be diverted by distractions. The clarity of identity within a super empath serves as a beacon of truth and authenticity. It allows them to live in alignment with their higher purpose, making choices and decisions that are rooted in their authentic self rather than in fear or insecurity. This clarity is what makes them so powerful in dismantling the narcissist's control. It is not their desire to fight, but their ability to stand firm in the truth of who they are that disrupts the narcissist's manipulative influence. The second keynote centers around the concept of emotional sovereignty, a key strength that allows the super empath to dismantle the control exerted by a narcissist. Emotional sovereignty refers to the ability to maintain control over one's emotional state, to govern one's emotional responses, and to navigate intense feelings without being overrun or manipulated by them. This is not about suppressing emotions, but rather about understanding and managing them from a position of strength, wisdom, and clarity. Narcissists excel at creating emotional chaos. They thrive on creating turbulence in the lives of others, stirring up feelings of insecurity, guilt, confusion, and dependency. These emotional manipulations are designed to make the victim question themselves, their worth, and their perceptions of reality. A narcissist's greatest weapon is their ability to trigger emotional responses that destabilize the victim's mental and emotional balance. By constantly creating emotional upheaval, the narcissist weakens the individual's sense of autonomy and control, making them more susceptible to manipulation. This is where the super empath's emotional sovereignty becomes a powerful tool. Emotional sovereignty is about reclaiming one's power over their emotions, refusing to let external circumstances or individuals dictate how they feel. It is the practice of recognizing emotions as they arise, acknowledging them, and then choosing how to respond. Rather than reacting impulsively or being swept away by emotional surges, the super empath takes a moment of pause. They understand that emotions are a natural part of being human, but do not need to dictate their behavior or decisions. When faced with a narcissist's manipulative tactics, the super empath does not immediately react. Instead, they practice emotional discernment, which means they take time to evaluate the situation, understand their emotional response, and choose a response based on their values and goals rather than fear or frustration. This emotional discernment allows the super empath to detach from the immediate emotional impact of the narcissist's actions and focus on the bigger picture, remaining grounded in their sense of self and purpose. The narcissist feeds off emotional reactions because they give them a sense of control and power. They manipulate situations to provoke emotional outbursts, knowing that such reactions create confusion, instability, and vulnerability. When the super empath does not provide the expected emotional fuel, the narcissist begins to lose their grip on control. The super empath's emotional sovereignty serves as a kind of invisible shield, one that prevents the narcissist from infiltrating their emotional state. By choosing how to respond instead of reacting, the super empath maintains an inner balance that remains unaffected by external emotional provocations. This ability to respond rather than react is critical. It allows the super empath to engage with the narcissist from a place of awareness and composure, rather than from a place of emotional vulnerability. The super empath's emotions are not a tool to be exploited, but are instead sources of wisdom and clarity that guide their decisions. The super empath still feels deeply, but they have mastered the ability to navigate those feelings without being overwhelmed by them. They are aware of their emotional triggers and are proactive in managing them. This self-awareness gives them the strength to deflect the narcissist's emotional manipulation tactics, which often include guilt tripping, playing the victim, or using emotional blackmail to get their way. A crucial aspect of emotional sovereignty is setting healthy boundaries. A narcissist will often attempt to breach personal boundaries, emotionally and psychologically, in an effort to maintain control. Whether through guilt, coercion, or manipulation, narcissists work to make the victim feel responsible for their emotions and needs. The super empath, however, understands that they are not responsible for the narcissist's emotional state. They recognize that they have the right to protect their emotional well-being and are not obligated to absorb the narcissist's emotional turmoil. The super empath, by maintaining emotional sovereignty, practices self-respect. They recognize their worth and refuse to allow others to impose emotional chaos upon them. Their boundaries are clear, firm, and consistently enforced. When the narcissist attempts to manipulate them emotionally, the super empath is not swayed by guilt, anger, or fear. They remain rooted in their own emotional space and do not give in to the narcissist's attempts to shift their emotional focus. Another element of emotional sovereignty is self-regulation. The super empath practices emotional self-regulation, meaning they intentionally manage their emotional responses in healthy, productive ways. This could involve deep breathing techniques, meditation, taking time to reflect, or seeking emotional support from trusted sources. Emotional self-regulation allows the super empath to maintain composure, even in the most challenging interactions with the narcissist. They do not let their emotions dictate their actions, but instead, they use their emotional awareness to guide their behavior. The super empath's emotional sovereignty is not about avoiding difficult emotions. It is about processing and integrating them in a healthy manner. When they feel anger, sadness, or frustration, they allow themselves to experience those emotions without judgment or suppression. However, rather than allowing these emotions to control them, they process them consciously, understanding the deeper reasons behind their feelings and using that understanding to make more informed decisions. This self-awareness empowers them to handle conflict with the narcissist without losing their sense of identity or emotional stability. Emotional sovereignty allows the super empath to be the master of their emotional state, not a passive victim of their feelings or the narcissist's manipulations. This level of emotional mastery is what makes the super empath so difficult for the narcissist to control. The narcissist thrives on emotional chaos, but the super empath thrives on emotional clarity and balance. When the super empath practices emotional sovereignty, they hold the power to dismantle the narcissist's attempts at control, one mindful, empowered choice at a time. The third keynote focuses on the weapon of silence and how it serves as a powerful strategy for a super empath in dismantling the narcissist's control. Silence is often misunderstood, but for the super empath, it is not a sign of weakness or avoidance. Instead, silence is an intentional, strategic act, a tool of clarity and discernment that speaks louder than words ever could. In the battle for control, where words are often used to manipulate, deceive, and assert dominance, silence becomes a weapon of immense power. Whether it's through emotional outbursts, guilt trips, or manipulation tactics. They use their words and actions to destabilize others, to create confusion and self-doubt, to pull their victims into a whirlwind of emotional chaos. For the narcissist, control is achieved by filling the space with their voice, making their perspective the only one that matters, and invalidating the perspectives and emotions of others. The louder they speak, the more they try to dominate the emotional landscape. In contrast, the super empath understands that sometimes the most effective response is no response at all, especially in the face of manipulative or toxic behavior. For the super empath, it's not an act of surrender. It is an act of strength. When confronted with the narcissist's chaos, the super empath recognizes the importance of taking a step back, choosing not to engage in the emotional firestorm. Instead of reacting impulsively or becoming entangled in the narcissist's web of lies and manipulation, the super empath chooses to remain silent, preserving their emotional energy and maintaining a sense of inner calm. This silence creates distance, not only between them and the narcissist, but also between the narcissist's manipulative tactics and their own emotional well-being. The narcissist's primary goal is to provoke a reaction. Whether through gaslighting, shaming, or using hurtful language, the narcissist aims to elicit a response that will reinforce their control over the situation. They want to trigger an emotional response that leaves the empath vulnerable, confused, and disoriented. However,
When the super empath chooses silence, the narcissist is deprived of the emotional fuel they rely on. Silence forces the narcissist to confront their own behavior without the expected validation or reaction. This is unsettling for the narcissist, as they are no longer able to maintain the illusion of control. Silence also allows the super empath to regain emotional clarity. In emotionally charged situations, it is easy to become swept up in the heat of the moment, making decisions based on raw emotions rather than thoughtful consideration.
By choosing silence, the super empath gains the space needed to process their thoughts, understand their emotions, and reflect on the best course of action.
It provides an opportunity to detach from the emotional chaos and approach the situation with greater insight and wisdom. The power of silence lies in its ability to break patterns. Narcissists often rely on repetitive tactics to maintain control, using the same methods of manipulation over and over again. They expect certain predictable responses from their targets, and when those responses don't come, the narcissist is thrown off balance. Silence disrupts the narcissist's strategy by denying them the emotional validation they seek. It prevents them from exploiting the situation for their own gain, thereby dismantling their control. Silence is a strategic pause that interrupts the narcissist's narrative, creating a void in which their manipulations have no power.
Silence forces the narcissist to confront their own behavior.
When there is no reaction, no argument, and no escalation from the super empath, the narcissist is left alone with their actions. The super empath's silence becomes a mirror, reflecting the narcissist's behavior without the need for confrontation or accusation. The narcissist is often so focused on their need to be seen and validated that when their words or actions do not elicit the desired response, it challenges their ego. It is a silent protest that highlights the emptiness of their tactics and exposes their manipulative nature. For the super empath, silence also serves as a powerful form of self-protection. Narcissists are adept at turning arguments into emotional battles, where the empath's every word is twisted, distorted, or used against them. By choosing silence, the super empath avoids engaging in a battle they cannot win. Instead of being drawn into the narcissist's toxic games, the super empath preserves their energy, dignity, and self-respect. Silence allows them to withdraw from the emotional toxicity without losing their sense of self. It is a boundary that the narcissist cannot breach, an impenetrable force that shields the empath from further manipulation. The silence of the super empath also allows them to preserve their power. When they choose not to engage in the narcissist's emotional storms, they do not lose their sense of control. The narcissist thrives on creating an emotional back and forth, pushing and pulling, trying to elicit reactions that further their control. The super empath's silence breaks this cycle. By choosing not to react to the narcissist's provocations, the super empath retains their power, choosing when and how to respond, rather than being dragged into a reactionary, emotionally driven battle. Silence is not about withdrawing from the relationship or giving up. Instead, it is about recognizing that engagement with a narcissist on their terms is a losing game. The super empath's silence is an act of strategic disengagement, a way of reclaiming control over their emotions and their actions. It is a tool that allows them to step outside of the narcissist's influence and gain perspective on the situation without being clouded by the narcissist's manipulations. Silence is one of the most profound tools that the super empath has in their arsenal. It is not passive, nor is it a sign of defeat. Rather, it is an active, intentional choice to withhold energy from the narcissist's manipulative tactics and to preserve emotional strength and clarity. The narcissist, who thrives on emotional chaos and constant validation, is often left powerless in the face of this weapon. Through silence, The super empath disarms the narcissist, reclaiming control over their emotional landscape and dismantling the narcissist's ability to dominate. The fourth keynote revolves around the concept of speaking truth without fear and how this empowers the super empath to dismantle the narcissist's control. Narcissists often manipulate others through lies, distortions, and a distorted version of reality. They craft narratives that serve their ego, convincing others that their perception is the only valid one. In relationships, this can create confusion, self-doubt, and a sense of dependency on the narcissist's version of truth. The narcissist relies on manipulation, gaslighting, and deceit to keep the upper hand, but the super empath's power comes from their ability to speak the truth without hesitation or fear, regardless of how uncomfortable it may be for the narcissist. When dealing with a narcissist, the truth becomes an essential weapon. The narcissist's foundation is built on lies, both about themselves and others. They constantly create alternate realities that serve their need for admiration, power, and control. This web of deceit is designed to destabilize those around them, making it difficult for victims to distinguish between reality and the narcissist's fabricated story. The narcissist thrives in this atmosphere of distortion, manipulating people's perceptions and often convincing them that their own truths are false. By keeping their victims in a state of confusion, the narcissist maintains power. The super empath, however, does not fall into the trap of these false narratives. They are able to see through the lies and perceive the truth with clarity.
This clarity is not based on surface-level observations, but on a deep understanding of the narcissist's tactics and a strong connection to their own values.
The super empath does not need to distort or hide their own truth because they have the courage to face the situation as it is, regardless of how uncomfortable or difficult it may seem. One of the most powerful things the super empath does in the face of a narcissist is to speak the truth unapologetically. Truth is not just a matter of words. It is an expression of alignment with reality, integrity, and inner strength. The super empath understands that speaking the truth does not mean engaging in a battle of words with the narcissist. Instead, it is about asserting their own reality and refusing to let the narcissist redefine it. By speaking truth in the face of narcissistic manipulation, the super empath strips away the narcissist's power to control the narrative. The narcissist thrives on controlling the story, but when the super empath speaks the truth, they begin to lose their hold. When a super empath speaks truth, they do not do so with the intention of hurting or attacking the narcissist. Instead, their intention is rooted in exposing the distortion of reality. The super empath's truth does not aim to provoke or escalate conflict, but rather to create clarity. In many cases, the narcissist's behavior and manipulation are rooted in a lack of self-awareness, and the truth serves as a tool for revelation. The super empath does not need to raise their voice or argue to make their truth clear. It is in the simple act of asserting their own reality that the narcissist's lies begin to unravel. The truth, when spoken clearly and calmly, disrupts the narcissist's narrative and exposes the emptiness of their control. One of the reasons narcissists fear the truth is that it threatens their carefully constructed identity. Narcissists are often deeply insecure, and their sense of self is fragile, relying on admiration and validation from others to maintain their facade. When the super empath speaks the truth, they challenge the narcissist's self-image and expose the vulnerability that the narcissist tries so hard to conceal. The narcissist's inflated ego cannot withstand the clarity of truth. It begins to erode the illusion they have built around themselves and leaves them exposed. The narcissist may attempt to deflect, deny, or even escalate the situation in order to avoid confronting the truth, but this only highlights the power of the super empath's statement. By speaking truth without fear, the super empath also reclaims their sense of self. Narcissists often seek to invalidate others' perceptions and distort their understanding of reality. The narcissist's manipulative tactics, such as gaslighting, create confusion and self-doubt in their victims. The super empath, however, does not allow these tactics to undermine their own perception. They do not allow the narcissist to dictate what is true for them. The act of speaking truth is a powerful declaration of autonomy, asserting that the super empath's reality is valid and worthy of recognition. It reaffirms their own perception of self, which the narcissist has tried to destabilize. It is important to note that speaking truth without fear does not mean fighting with the narcissist or engaging in a confrontation. The super empath understands that engagement with the narcissist's tactics only feeds into the power struggle. Instead, the super empath's truth is spoken with dignity and respect, choosing to express their perspective clearly without getting drawn into the narcissist's emotional manipulation. The truth spoken by the super empath is grounded in their own values, and it is the expression of an authentic voice that the narcissist cannot control. In relationships with narcissists, truth-telling often forces the narcissist to confront uncomfortable realities. The narcissist has constructed a narrative where they are the center of attention, the victim, or the one in control, and the super empath's truth challenges that. The narcissist, whose identity is often tied to the validation of others, cannot tolerate this disruption to their constructed reality. They may attempt to retaliate, minimize, or discredit the super empath's truth, but their efforts are futile in the face of someone who knows and speaks their truth with conviction. When the super empath speaks the truth, they do so from a place of calm authority. Their truth is not a reaction to the narcissist's behavior, but a response grounded in their own integrity. This authority does not stem from the desire to dominate or control, but rather from a deep sense of self-respect and confidence. The super empath speaks with the quiet strength that comes from knowing their worth and refusing to accept any version of reality that diminishes or invalidates them. Whether personal or professional, the narcissist may use their words to manipulate, intimidate, or dominate, but the super empath's truth serves as an antidote. The narcissist's control begins to crumble when their false narratives are confronted with authenticity, and the super empath's truth creates a space where their reality is no longer shaped by the narcissist's distorted perception. It is not just the words that hold power, but the authenticity and strength behind them. When the super empath speaks truth without fear, they are not only dismantling the narcissist's control, but also empowering themselves and reclaiming their rightful place in the relationship.